Hey guys, it's Sound on the Track, back with the second half of the melody tutorial. So we're going to dive straight into making chords and chord progressions and melodies. If you haven't checked out the first half of this tutorial, I suggest that you do. It gives some really useful tips on how to start off on making a chord progression. So I'm just going to dive into this real quick. We're going to be creating 4 bars worth of a chord progression. So I'm going to start off with the note that we're going to be using, our key note, the defining key to this chord progression, and that is D sharp. I'm just going to move to the piano. So we're going to be using D sharp. The key is D sharp, and we're in natural minor. So I'm just going to play around with the keys over here on the left side, which I suggest everyone does. It's easier if you start off doing this so you know what bass notes you want to use. By bass notes, I literally mean the lower notes of the chord, which is what I'm about to do. Alright, so I think I figured out what I wanted to do with the chord progression. So I'm going to put the bass notes down. Alright, so these are the bass notes that we're going to be using. The reason that I say find the bass notes first is because it just sets up making the chords easier. Basically, what you want to do when making chord progressions is put in what you think is going to come in next. It should come naturally. You're supposed to predict what you're going to hear. Like in any song, you kind of know what's going to happen before it happens because melodies have a consistent pattern. So what we're going to do is we're going to now put the rest of the chord progression in. What you're going to do is you're going to put every other note down that is in the progression. Alright, so now we're going to hear what that sounds like. I actually want to change this up. Okay, so the reason that I switched that up, it's still the same chord, but it's an inversion of that chord. The reason that I did that was because it sounded a little funky. It sounded like it was slightly out of key when it really wasn't. It was just diminished. And when I say it's diminished, it means that it's a little muddy. So what I wanted to do was bring the C sharp right here, and bring it up so that it would be consistent with the chord progression. It continues on in the next chord. So I just made an inversion to this chord so that it would sound less muddy. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to select the bass chords. We're going to copy them, paste them, and move them an octave lower. So now we have this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a melody, but in the lower half of the chords. When I say lower half, I mean this section over here in the bass half. And when I say melody, I just mean we're going to create a bass section, basically. Not the 808 bass, but the piano bass, in order to lead into the next chord more smoothly. Bring this up a little bit. I kind of don't really like this right here, so I'm just going to switch it up. Alright, that actually sounds pretty good. I'm happy with what we have right now. So I'm actually going to bring these an octave lower. Alright, so I actually like what we have down. So I'm just going to add a couple of high notes to the chords so it sounds a little fuller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip another note from the highest note of the chord, and I'm just going to put on the next one. Now let's hear how that sounds. Let me see how it would sound if I put it with the C sharp right here. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to create the melody. So the rest of the melody, I should say, the high part to the piano. So what I like to do personally is I usually take the second note of each chord progression, which would be this one, which would be these right here, and I would shorten them halfway through the bar, or through each bar, and then I would move it to the end. And then I would move it up an octave. It just sounds good, but since I've started to actually create melodies from scratch without using the chords, I've noticed that if you put it anywhere in the scale, if you put any note anywhere in the scale while the chords are playing, it would sound good all by itself. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of switch it around in the next section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, or I'm going to select, actually I'm not going to copy, I'm going to select and click Command B. And then it will transfer over to the next 4 bars. I'm going to do the same thing with the chord progression that we have. And I'm actually going to alter the second half of the melody. Alright. Now, usually what I do is I alter some of the chords. So I'm just going to take out that low C. And I'm going to take away this. I'm actually going to move this B up an octave and remove that A. That way it sounds completely different. And now what we're going to do with this melody is we're just going to move it an octave lower. we're going to copy and paste it, and we're going to move it back up and just move it to where it's supposed to go. Make it sound a little fuller. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to click Option R for everyone on Mac. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to alter the velocity of the piano keys. Usually when you pull up the randomizer, it will be like this. The pattern will be selected right here. You just want to turn that off. And all you're going to do is mess with the velocity of the keys. So let's see how this sounds. Now we're going to do the same thing with the chord progression. And we're just going to mess with it a little bit. So what that does is that it gives it more variation in the piano and in the melody, and it'll make it sound more appealing. So I'm actually going to select this half, and I'm going to click Option R again. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to randomize it the opposite way so that there's more variation. I'm going to do the same thing in this melody. I'm going to keep this one the same, but I'm going to switch the first one. Let's see how that sounds. Alright. So there we have our melody. In order to add more variation, I'm going to show you another trick. So what we're going to do is we're going to select these chords right here. We're actually going to select the whole track. We're going to copy it, and we're going to bring it into another plugin. I'm going to use Nexus, and I'm actually going to change the sound that I have right now. Actually, alright, so I'm going to use a guitar, and I'm actually going to Command V right there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click this wrench tool, and we're going to go to Strum. This is going to make it sound like a regular guitar, simply just strumming melodies or notes at a certain point in time. So we're just going to see how that sounds. So you're just going to mess around with those knobs till you get how you want it to sound. These little notes right here, we're just going to drag them out a little bit more. Wherever you see those notes, you're just going to drag it out more. Oh. That way it doesn't sound like a little tick. So now what you're going to do is you're just going to bring that octave up. And you're just going to move whatever notes you want around. I'm just doing this to make it sound a little bit better, since I know that the bass notes are there. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the piano. I'm going to select everything again. I'm going to put it into Nexus, the regular way, just an octave lower. So now this is what it's going to sound like with everything together. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix this a little bit just to make it sound better. Bring some EQ. EQ is to make it sound better so it won't sound so muddy and so that it won't conflict with any other area of the song, especially if you have high and low. You can cut out the lows so that if you have an 808 or a bass, it won't sound very muddy. I will get into EQ and all this stuff here on the mixer track in another tutorial. It might be in a couple more tutorials or after a producer cook-up with a couple of producer friends that I have, but I'm not really going to go into deep detail. I'm just going to do this to kind of speed up the process a little bit. Okay. I'm actually going to change the sound of this piano part. So that is the melody. I'm just going to put some drums on it and a little halftime on the piano. And let's see how the halftime on the piano is. It changes up the way that the piano really sounds. Alright, so now I'm just going to put some drums on here so you guys can hear what that would sound like. Alright, so now I'm just going to put this rim shot in, and then maybe some hi-hats, and that's it for the tutorial. Okay guys, so this is the final beat, and next tutorial we're going to be talking about how to make your 808s and kicks hit. So we're going to do a quick cook-up, and then we're going to make the 808s and kicks really hit hard, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, and subscribe. And this is the final beat. Soon I will have a producer cook-up with some of my producer friends. We'll probably do it through Zoom since we are in quarantine. But here's the final beat. I hope you guys enjoy.